We all have dreams. Every one of us dreams of doing something great, dreams of creating something meaningful, dreams of living a life that matters. But here's the truth no one likes to admit. Most dreams never see the light of day. They remain locked away in notebooks, in journals, and late night thoughts. They live in the land of someday, and someday is a dangerous place. Because someday is where potential goes to die. See, the problem isn't that we don't dream big enough. The problem is that we don't give our dreams a structure to breathe, a container to grow in. We say, I want to write a book someday. Or I want to start my business one day. Or I want to get fit, travel the world, make a difference. But we never say when. And when, there's no how. A dream without a deadline isn't a plan, it's a wish. And wishes don't build legacies. Think about it. A dream is like a spark, exciting, full of potential, but fleeting. It can fade as quickly as it appears. A deadline is the oxygen that keeps that spark alive long enough to ignite something real. When you give your dream a timeline, you give it urgency, energy, and direction. You turn an idea into a commitment. There's a reason deadlines exist in the first place. They give us boundaries. They force us to make choices. Without boundaries, we drift. We wait for the perfect moment, the perfect mood, the perfect amount of motivation. But perfection is an illusion. Nothing ever starts perfectly. But everything great starts somewhere. Most people don't fail because they lack talent or opportunity. They fail because they lack a timeline. They wait until they feel ready. But let's be honest, no one ever really feels ready. Readiness is not a feeling, it's a decision. The moment you set a deadline, you stop waiting for permission and start taking ownership. I've met so many people who tell me they have a dream. They speak with passion, with fire in their eyes. But when I ask, when will you start? Their energy shifts. They pause. Soon is the sibling of someday. It sounds responsible, but it's really just hesitation in disguise. We often mistake motion for progress. We research, plan, prepare, think, and dream, all necessary steps. But without a deadline, those steps never converge. They scatter. We move, but we don't advance. A deadline aligns our actions toward a clear finish line. It transforms chaos into clarity. Deadlines give meaning to effort. They make every day count. When you know that time is ticking, every small step suddenly matters. You start valuing your mornings, your routines, your focus. You stop wasting hours on distractions that don't move you closer to your dream. Think of it like this. Imagine running a race without a finish line. How far would you go before you stop? Probably not far. You'd run until you got tired or bored. But when there's a finish line, even if it's miles away, you find strength you didn't know you had. You pace yourself, you endure, because you know where you're going. That's what a deadline does. It gives your dream a destination. But there's something deeper here. It's not just about structure or productivity. It's about commitment. When you set a deadline, you're declaring something to the universe. You're saying, I'm serious about this. You're planting your flag in the ground and saying, this matters to me enough to put time on it. Deadlines are uncomfortable because they expose us. They strip away the illusion of infinite time. They force us to confront our fears of failure, of imperfection, of not being enough. That's why so many people avoid them. But that discomfort, that's the birthplace of growth. That's the moment you stop dreaming about life and start living it. When you attach a deadline to your dream, it stops being abstract and becomes real. And when things become real, they demand action. That's when you start waking up earlier. That's when you start saying no to things that don't serve your purpose. That's when you start feeling the pull of something greater than convenience, purpose. Purpose thrives on structure. Passion fades without it. Passion is emotional. It burns hot and fast. Purpose endures because it's tied to responsibility, to consistency, to deadlines. You don't build something meaningful on emotion alone, you build it on commitment. And commitment lives inside time. Here's something most people misunderstand. A deadline isn't a restriction, it's liberation. It's the tool that frees you from endless postponement. Because once you decide, when the house starts to reveal itself, you begin to make plans, to prioritize, to break your dream into steps. Suddenly, the impossible starts to look manageable. Look at the people who've done extraordinary things. They didn't just dream big, they worked with urgency. They gave themselves timelines. A writer who says, I'll finish my book by December 31st will always progress faster than one who says, I'll finish it someday. Not because they're more talented, but because they've chosen accountability over fantasy. Accountability changes everything. It shifts your mindset from to when it replaces fear with focus. And the more you meet your own deadlines, the more you build trust with yourself. That trust is the foundation of confidence. Confidence doesn't come from knowing you'll never fail. It comes from knowing you'll follow through even when it's hard. And deadlines give you the space to prove that to yourself again and again. Now, let's be honest, you won't always meet your deadlines. Sometimes you'll miss them. Sometimes life will get in the way. But even then, you'll be closer than if you'd never set one at all. Because progress, not perfection, is the goal. Deadlines aren't meant to punish you. They're meant to push you. They remind you that time is finite. And that's not something to fear. It's something to honor. Because time gives value to our actions. If we had forever, nothing would matter. But we don't. And that's what makes every day meaningful. Setting a deadline is one of the most powerful acts of self-respect. It's saying, my dream deserves a date. It's refusing to let your potential stay trapped in wishful thinking. And here's the beautiful paradox. When you set a deadline for your dream, you actually become freer. You stop carrying the weight of someday on your shoulders. You stop feeling guilty for not starting. You start doing. You start moving. You start becoming. Dreams don't need more inspiration. They need direction. They need a path, a schedule, a finish line, because clarity beats motivation every single time. So if there's something you've been dreaming about, that idea you can't stop thinking of, that goal that's been waiting on the shelf, don't just write it down. Date it. Say it out loud. Be this day, this will be done, and then commit to the process. Break it down. Build momentum. Hold yourself accountable. And remember, you're not racing against others. You're racing against regret. The only thing worse than failing is wondering what could have happened if you'd started sooner. Dreams are beautiful. They give us hope, but deadlines give them life. Without a deadline, your dream is a picture. With one, it becomes a story. And the world doesn't remember pictures. It remembers stories. So don't just dream. Decide when your dream will begin, because that's the moment your life starts to change. Not when you imagine it, but when you schedule it. Dreams without deadlines fade. But dreams with deadlines, they change the world. There's a quiet moment that happens right before change begins. That instant when an idea becomes more than a thought, when it starts to feel possible. We've all felt it. It's that spark that says, what if I really did this? But here's the truth, the spark doesn't last. Inspiration fades, excitement fades, even passion fades. What keeps a dream alive? What turns it into something tangible is momentum, and momentum doesn't happen by accident. It's built carefully, deliberately through the power of deadlines. Momentum is the difference between a dream that grows and a dream that dies. It's what separates those who say, I want to, from those who say, I did. And the only way to create momentum is to give your dream a finish line. Not because you need pressure to perform, but because pressure is what transforms potential into progress. When we set a deadline, something remarkable happens. We start moving. We stop waiting for inspiration to strike, and instead, we create it through action. Deadlines turn our ideas from abstract concepts into living projects. They force us to get specific, to take that first small step. And that first step, no matter how uncertain, creates motion. The human brain craves clarity. It's wired to act when there's a sense of urgency. Think about it. When we know something is due, our focus sharpens. Distractions fade. Priorities realign. But when there's no urgency, everything feels optional. We procrastinate. We tell ourselves, I'll get to it when I have more time. But time never appears out of nowhere. We make time when we give it purpose. That's what deadlines do. They create purpose in time. We often think of deadlines as stress-inducing, as constraints that limit creativity. But the truth is, they do the opposite. They direct creativity. Without direction, creativity becomes chaos. You can have 1,000 ideas, but without a framework to channel them, they dissolve into overwhelm. Deadlines act as a container, not to restrict, but to shape. They give form to freedom. Imagine a sculptor with no block of marble, no tools, no time limit. Could they ever create a masterpiece? Probably not. The structure, the block, the tools, the timeline doesn't hinder creativity. It focuses it. In the same way deadlines focus your dream. They take it from maybe someday to this is happening now. But here's the thing, momentum isn't built on big leaps. It's built on consistent movement. Tiny, deliberate steps that add up over time. When you attach a deadline to your dream, you naturally start to break it down. You set milestones, you create rhythm. You move from chaos to cadence. And that rhythm, that forward motion, is what keeps you going when motivation disappears. Because it will disappear. Motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes. But momentum doesn't depend on how you feel. It depends on what you do. The moment you set a deadline, you remove the option of waiting for the right moment. You commit to progress, not perfection. You start showing up even when you don't feel like it. And that's when real transformation happens, in the moments when you push through resistance, when you act without excitement, when you do the work simply because it's due. Deadlines remind us that time is moving whether we act or not. Every day we delay, the gap between where we are and where we want to be widens. But every small action, every step, every draft, every rehearsal closes that gap. Progress isn't about giant leaps, it's about steady motion, guided by clear intention. I've seen people with extraordinary dreams, people with talent, intelligence, and heart stay stuck because they never set a date. They say things like, "I'm working on it." But working on it is endless. It has no momentum. It's motion without direction. But say, "I'm finishing this by the end of the month," and suddenly everything changes. You move differently. You prioritize differently. You think differently. That's the power of a deadline. It activates the mind. It wakes up your focus. It whispers, "This matters now." There's a story of a young entrepreneur who wanted to launch a product that could change lives. For years, he refined the idea, adjusted the design, hesitated. Every time he got close to launching, he found a new reason to delay. "It's not perfect yet," he'd say. "I just need a little more time." Until one day a mentor told him, "Perfection is the enemy of progress. Give yourself a deadline or this dream will never see daylight." So he did. 90 days. That's all he gave himself. 90 days to finalize, test, and launch. And guess what? It wasn't perfect. But it was real, it existed, it made impact. And most importantly, it built momentum. Because once something is in motion, it's easier to refine, improve, and expand. You can't adjust what doesn't exist. Too often, we wait for certainty before we act. But deadlines flip that equation. They make action the source of certainty. When you move, you learn, you adapt, you grow. The more you move, the clearer the path becomes. Momentum gives you clarity that thinking never can. And here's another truth: deadlines make you courageous. Because setting a date means you're willing to risk failure. You're saying, "I'm going to try, even if I'm not ready." That's brave. It's easy to stay in the safety of endless preparation. But deadlines pull you out of comfort and into growth. When you commit to a timeline, you're not just managing time, you're mastering fear. Fear thrives in uncertainty. It whispers, "You can do it later." But a deadline silences that voice. It tells fear, later isn't an option anymore. And with that shift, momentum takes over. You start to experience the satisfaction of progress. You start to build confidence, not because you've arrived, but because you're moving. Confidence doesn't come from achievement, it comes from momentum. Every time you follow through, even imperfectly, you prove to yourself that you're capable. Momentum also creates accountability. Once you set a deadline, you start involving others. You tell people about your goal. You share your timeline, and that simple act of sharing multiplies your commitment. It creates external accountability that supports internal resolve. You start to feel responsible, not just to your dream, but to the people who believe in it. And here's something extraordinary that happens when momentum builds. It becomes self-sustaining. The more progress you make, the more motivated you feel. The more motivated you feel, the more action you take. It's a feedback loop that grows stronger with every step. But it all starts with one decision, one deadline. The opposite of momentum is stagnation. And stagnation is slow death for any dream. It feels safe, but it's dangerous. Because when you're not moving forward, you're moving backward. Time doesn't stop just because you do. Momentum isn't about speed, it's about consistency. It's not about how fast you move, it's about not stopping. Deadlines keep you in motion, they keep your energy directed toward what matters. Without them, it's easy to get lost in distractions, to confuse business with progress. But with them, every effort is aligned with purpose. There's a discipline in honoring your deadlines. It teaches you self-respect. It builds resilience. Because when you commit to a timeline and meet it, or even when you miss it but learn from it, you grow stronger, you develop the muscle of follow-through, and that muscle will serve you in every area of life. Think about people who changed the world. They didn't just dream of possibilities. They created schedules, set targets, and acted with urgency. They knew that ideas are fragile things. If not acted upon quickly, they fade. Deadlines protected those ideas. They turned inspiration into innovation. That's why every meaningful project, every powerful story, every great invention carries the mark of a deadline somewhere in its timeline, not as a burden, but as a catalyst, because momentum isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. Without it, even the greatest dreams lose their power. You can't build a legacy on intentions. You build it on action, and action begins the moment you give yourself a time frame. So, if there's a dream sitting in your heart right now, something you've been postponing, give it a date. Not next year, not someday now. Set a clear, specific deadline. Write it down. Say it out loud. And then take one step today. Because momentum doesn't start when everything's ready. It starts when you decide to move, even if it's small, even if it's uncertain. Dreams don't need more time, they need momentum. And momentum begins with a deadline. It's the heartbeat of progress, the invisible force that turns vision into victory. So don't just dream about what could be. Decide when it will be, because once you set the time, time itself starts working for you. Motivation is exciting. It's the rush you feel at the beginning of something new, the fire that burns bright when an idea first captures your imagination. It's that surge of energy when you say, I'm going to do this. But as powerful as motivation feels, it's fragile. It's fleeting. It fades the moment life gets hard, the moment the excitement wears off, the moment comfort whispers, you can rest a little. And that's why motivation alone will never be enough to achieve anything meaningful. What carries you forward after the spark fades is discipline. Discipline is the quiet, consistent voice that speaks long after motivation is gone. It's the voice that says, I made a commitment and I'll see it through. It's not glamorous. It doesn't shout or cheer. It doesn't need to. Discipline doesn't depend on how you feel. It depends on who you are. And the bridge between who you are and who you want to become is built by what you do when no one is watching. Most people start with passion, they feel inspired, they imagine success, and for a moment it feels real, but then reality sets in. The early mornings, the long hours, the setbacks, the slow progress, this is where most give up. Not because the dream wasn't worth it, but because the fire that fueled them wasn't built to last. Motivation burns fast, like kindling. Discipline burns slow, like coal. One starts the fire, but only the other keeps it alive. The reason discipline matters more than motivation is simple, and motivation is emotional. Discipline is intentional. Emotions are unpredictable. They rise and fall with circumstances. If you depend on them to take action, your results will always be inconsistent. But intention, the decision to act no matter what, creates consistency. And consistency creates results. That's where deadlines come in. Deadlines give discipline a structure. They turn intention into accountability. When you set a deadline, you're not just scheduling time, you're setting an expectation for yourself. You're saying, I will show up, even when it's hard, even when it's inconvenient, even when I don't feel like it. Think of athletes, they don't train because they're motivated every day. They train because the game has a date, because competition is coming whether they feel ready or not. The deadline demands discipline. It demands action. They can't wait for motivation. They prepare because they must. That's why they improve. That's why they perform. That's why they win. In our own lives, the same truth applies. When you tie your dream to a deadline, you stop negotiating with your feelings. You stop asking, do I feel like it today? And start saying, it's time. Discipline doesn't care about mood. It cares about movement. You may not always feel inspired to work, but you can always choose to begin. Discipline doesn't mean you never rest. It means you rest with intention. It means you earn your rest by honoring your commitments. It's about doing what matters most, especially when it's least convenient. That's when growth happens. Not in comfort, but in commitment. The difference between people who succeed and those who don't isn't talent. It's not luck. It's not even intelligence. It's discipline. The willingness to do what others won't day after day without needing to feel inspired, because eventually discipline creates its own motivation. When you start seeing progress, when you realize that your effort is paying off, motivation returns, but now it's anchored in reality, not fantasy. We've been taught to chase motivation. We look for it in videos, books, speeches, quotes. But motivation is like caffeine. It gives you a temporary boost. Discipline, on the other hand, builds stamina. It doesn't spike your energy. It sustains it. It's not loud. It's steady. It's not exciting. It's reliable, and reliability is what turns ordinary effort into extraordinary results. Discipline is also a form of self-respect. Every time you follow through on a promise to yourself, you prove that your word matters. You strengthen your integrity. You build trust within yourself. That trust becomes your foundation. Because if you can't rely on yourself, you'll always be searching for something outside of you to keep you moving. Deadlines reinforce that trust. They remind you of your promise. When you say, I will do this by this date, and you deliver, you grow, not just in skill, but in character. And even when you miss the mark, you still gain something valuable. The lesson that consistency, not perfection, is what truly builds success. There's a myth that discipline kills creativity, that structure limits freedom. But in reality, discipline creates freedom. When you're disciplined, you don't waste energy on indecision. You don't lose time to procrastination. You don't live in the stress of unfinished things. You're free to focus fully on the moment because you've already decided what matters. Discipline gives you peace of mind. It turns chaos into clarity. People often say, I need motivation to start. But what if the truth is the opposite? What if you need to start to feel motivated? The act of doing creates energy. The movement itself generates momentum. You don't wait to feel ready. You get ready by doing. Discipline teaches you that progress comes through action, not emotion. Every morning you wake up, you face a choice, comfort, or commitment. Comfort gives you pleasure now. Commitment gives you purpose later. Discipline helps you choose purpose, because purpose lasts. Purpose fills the gaps that motivation cannot. There will be days when you feel nothing. When your mind is tired, your body is heavy, your heart feels uncertain. Those are the days discipline matters most. Those are the days that define you, not the days when everything feels easy, but the days when you keep going anyway. Because discipline isn't about doing what's fun, it's about doing what's right. When you attach discipline to a dream, something incredible happens. Your identity changes. You stop being someone who hopes to achieve and you become someone who acts to achieve. You move from wishful thinking to deliberate living. You begin to see yourself differently. Not as someone who dreams, but as someone who delivers. Discipline doesn't mean rigidity. It doesn't mean you can't adapt. It means you stay true to the goal, even if the path changes. Flexibility in strategy, firmness in purpose, that's what discipline looks like. Deadlines help you balance both. They remind you where you're going, even when the route takes unexpected turns. And when you finally reach the finish line, you realize something profound. It wasn't the dream that changed you. It was the discipline. The deadlines, the sacrifices, the routines, the consistency. The real reward isn't just achieving the goal. It's becoming the kind of person capable of achieving it. Because discipline doesn't end when you meet the deadline. It becomes part of who you are. It becomes your default mode. Focused, consistent, intentional. You start setting new goals, new timelines, not because you're chasing success, but because you've learned how to move with purpose. We live in a world obsessed with quick results. Everyone wants the shortcut, the hack, the secret formula, but there is no shortcut to mastery. There's no hack for consistency. There's only the daily decision to show up. That's what discipline is, 1,000 small, unglamorous choices that lead to something extraordinary, and the irony is, the more disciplined you become, the less effort it feels like. Because discipline becomes a habit, it becomes natural. You no longer fight with yourself to begin, beginning becomes automatic. You stop negotiating with laziness because the conversation is already settled. You are the kind of person who follows through. Think of any great leader, artist, athlete, or thinker you admire. None of them rely solely on motivation. They built their success on disciplined effort, repeated day after day, long after the excitement disappeared. Their genius wasn't in their inspiration, it was in their consistency. That's the secret no one talks about. Discipline doesn't look heroic, but it is. It's the hero that works behind the scenes, quietly shaping your destiny while motivation comes and goes. So if you ever feel like you've lost motivation, don't panic. You don't need to feel inspired every day. You just need to keep your promise to yourself. Keep showing up. Keep taking the next step. Because the act of doing will reignite the spark you thought you'd lost. Remember, motivation gets you started, but discipline gets you finished. Deadlines give you the framework, discipline gives you the drive, and progress gives you purpose. Every dream will test your endurance. Every vision will challenge your patience. There will be moments of doubt, of fatigue, of frustration, but those are the moments that refine you. Discipline is forged in the fire of difficulty. It's strengthened by repetition. It's rewarded by results. So don't chase motivation. Build discipline. Let your deadlines guide you. Let your habits support you. Let your actions define you. Because one day when you look back, you'll realize that success didn't come from the days you felt inspired. It came from the days you didn't, but you showed up anyway. Motivation is the spark that starts the engine. Discipline is the fuel that keeps it running. And if you can master the discipline to move even when the feeling is gone, there's nothing in the world you can't build. That's the truth about greatness. It isn't born from bursts of inspiration. It's built one disciplined day at a time. Accountability is one of the hardest, yet most powerful disciplines to build. It demands honesty. It demands humility. It demands the courage to face yourself. Most people love the idea of growth until they realize that real growth only happens under the weight of responsibility. Dreams don't just need vision and passion, they need accountability. Because accountability is the force that transforms intention into integrity. It's what keeps you moving when the excitement disappears and when no one is watching. When you set a deadline, you are doing something profound. You are creating a contract with yourself. You are saying, this is who I am and this is what I will do. And that commitment, that invisible agreement, becomes the mirror through which you see your character. If you meet your deadline, you learn the power of your word. If you miss it, you learn humility. Either way, you grow. Accountability is uncomfortable, but it's meant to challenge the part of us that wants to escape responsibility, that wants to stay in the safe zone where no one can judge or question us. But comfort never created greatness. Accountability does. It turns excuses into execution. It forces you to measure progress instead of just imagining it. The problem is, most people mistake accountability for punishment. They think it's about guilt or pressure or someone standing over them with expectations. But true accountability isn't about judgment, it's about growth. It's about alignment between your actions and your values. It's the practice of holding yourself to a higher standard, not because someone told you to, but because you respect yourself enough to do it. There's a kind of quiet strength that comes from being accountable. You stop making promises you don't intend to keep. You stop blaming circumstances. You stop pointing fingers. You realize that the only person standing between you and your dream is the one in the mirror. And that realization can be painful. But it's also liberating. Because once you accept full responsibility for your life, you gain full control over it. Deadlines make accountability real. They don't just define what you'll do. They define when. Without time limits, accountability fades. Soon becomes later, and later becomes never. A deadline gives accountability urgency. It says, your word matters now. And that urgency builds discipline. It pushes you to act even when you'd rather wait. Imagine telling yourself, I'll get healthy someday. That's a nice idea, but it means nothing. Now imagine saying, I will lose 10 pounds in 60 days. Suddenly, your words carry weight. The clock is ticking. You've made a promise. That's accountability. It's no longer about wishing. It's about doing. But here's the truth about accountability. It's not just about results. It's about honesty in the process. You won't always meet every goal. You'll stumble, you'll fall, you'll miss timelines. But accountability means you own that. You don't hide behind excuses. You say, this is what went wrong. This is what I'll do better next time. That's how you build character. And character matters more than perfection because people trust consistency, not excuses. When you consistently honor your word, even when it's hard, you build credibility. And credibility is the foundation of every relationship, every team, every dream that lasts. We live in a world that celebrates achievement but rarely honors accountability. We glorify success stories without showing the nights of discipline, the missed deadlines, the uncomfortable conversations that shaped them. Yet those moments of accountability are where true transformation happens. Think of the leaders, creators, and changemakers you admire. What makes them remarkable isn't just what they've achieved, it's their willingness to take ownership. When things go right, they share credit. When things go wrong, they take responsibility. That's the kind of integrity that inspires trust. Accountability builds trust not just with others, but with yourself. Every time you follow through, your belief in your own capacity grows. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, your self-respect deepens. And when you don't, you feel the loss. That feeling, the sting of disappointment, isn't punishment. It's feedback. It's your conscience reminding you that you're capable of more. But accountability doesn't happen in isolation. It thrives in community. When you surround yourself with people who challenge you, who expect more from you, who refuse to let you settle for less, you elevate. Because accountability shared becomes accountability strengthened. When others hold you to your word, you rise to meet it. Not out of fear, but out of respect. The people who achieve great things aren't necessarily smarter or luckier. They're accountable. They set deadlines, they measure progress, they admit when they fall short, and they keep going. They don't view mistakes as failure, they see them as feedback. They don't run from responsibility, they run toward it. Because they understand that accountability is not a burden, it's the price of growth. There's a phrase that says, pressure makes diamonds. It's true, but only if the pressure is embraced. Deadlines create pressure, and accountability transforms that pressure into purpose. Without it, we stay soft. With it, we harden into resilience, and that resilience doesn't just help you meet goals, it shapes your identity. You start to see yourself differently. You no longer need external validation because you've learned to trust your own effort. You don't chase easy wins. You chase real progress. You don't need applause to keep going. You keep going because it's who you are. There's a certain dignity and accountability. It demands honesty, but it also gives clarity. It helps you separate what truly matters from what merely distracts. It simplifies your decisions. Because once you hold yourself accountable to a clear standard, everything else becomes noise. Deadlines become checkpoints in your journey of integrity. They help you measure not just productivity, but authenticity. Did I do what I said I would do? Did I honor my time, my word, my vision? Those questions, asked consistently, shape a life of meaning. And meaning doesn't come from success, it comes from alignment. When what you say, what you believe, and what you do are in harmony, you find peace. That peace doesn't come from comfort, it comes from clarity, from knowing that you showed up fully even when it was hard. There's something profoundly human about accountability. It's not about perfection, it's about presence. It's about being aware enough to see your flaws, humble enough to admit them, and courageous enough to improve them. Accountability doesn't demand that you never fall, it demands that you never stop standing back up. In a world where it's easy to hide behind excuses, accountability is rebellion. It's the act of saying, no, this is my responsibility, I own this. And that ownership becomes power. Because when you own your failures, you also own your ability to change. When you take responsibility for your choices, you take control of your destiny. The irony is that most people fear accountability because they think it limits them. But it's the opposite. Accountability doesn't trap you, it frees you. It frees you from blame, from uncertainty, from the endless cycle of excuses that keep you small. It turns chaos into clarity. It transforms fear into focus. When you live accountably, you stop chasing perfection, you start chasing progress. You start seeing deadlines not as threats, but as opportunities to prove your consistency. You begin to trust that every effort, every on-time delivery, every honest reflection, every moment of self-correction is building something bigger than a result. It's building your reputation. It's building your reliability. It's building your legacy. Because at the end of the day, people remember those who took responsibility. The ones who stood tall when things went wrong. The ones who didn't hide. The ones who said, it was me and I will make it right. Those are the people who lead the ones others follow, not because they're perfect, but because they're real. Deadlines keep us honest. They expose whether we're committed or just interested, and accountability makes us stronger for it. Every time you meet a deadline, you reinforce your integrity. Every time you own your actions, you strengthen your character, and every time you learn from your mistakes, you become wiser. The truth is, accountability is a choice. You can run from it or you can rise with it. You can hide behind excuses or you can stand in your truth. You can let life happen to you or you can take charge of it. The moment you choose accountability, everything changes. So set your deadlines, make your promises, and keep them, not because someone is watching, but because you are. Because the person you're becoming is paying attention to every decision you make. When you live with accountability, you stop needing external pressure to push you. You become self-propelled, you act from purpose, not fear. You lead with integrity, not ego. And you realize that accountability isn't the end of freedom, it's the beginning of it. At its core, accountability is love in action. Love for your purpose, love for your word, love for the person you are becoming. It's saying, I care enough to be honest with myself. I respect my vision enough to do what it takes. That's why accountability builds character. Because character isn't formed in comfort, it's formed in responsibility. It's built every time you choose truth over excuses, action over apathy, growth over avoidance. And when you live that way, when accountability becomes your default, you'll notice something beautiful. You stop fearing failure. Because you understand that even when you fall short, you've grown. Even when you miss a deadline, you've learned. Even when you're imperfect, you're progressing. Accountability isn't about being flawless. It's about being faithful. Faithful to your word. Faithful to your growth. Faithful to your dream. That's how character is built, not in moments of victory, but in moments of responsibility. Because when you take responsibility, you don't just build results. You build yourself. Momentum is a strange and powerful thing. It's invisible, yet it determines everything. You can't see it, but you can feel it. The flow of progress, the rhythm of motion, the energy that carries you forward when everything seems aligned. Momentum is not luck. It's not chance. It's the outcome of consistency, trust, and effort multiplied over time. When you have it, life feels effortless. When you lose it, everything feels heavy. But here's the truth. Momentum doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's built moment by moment through small actions, through tiny commitments, through the discipline to keep moving, even when you don't feel like it. People often think success is about speed, about doing more faster. But momentum isn't about pace, it's about direction. You can be running full speed in the wrong direction and end up exhausted and lost. Momentum is about alignment. It's about having clarity of why you're moving, not just how fast. Because when your why is clear, your actions compound. When your direction is aligned with your purpose, every small effort contributes to a greater force. That's when progress becomes natural. That's when you stop pushing and start flowing. But before you build momentum, you must start. And starting is often the hardest part. Most people wait for motivation. They wait to feel ready, to feel inspired, to feel confident. But that's not how momentum works. Momentum doesn't start with motivation. It creates it. The moment you take the first small action, even when you're uncertain, you set something in motion. That first step sends a signal to your mind that you're serious, that you're not waiting for the perfect conditions. You're creating them. There's a quiet magic in consistency. When you show up again and again, something inside you begins to shift. You stop negotiating with your excuses. You stop needing the world's approval. You start trusting your own rhythm. And slowly, the small daily acts of discipline accumulate into something far bigger than effort. They become identity. You're no longer someone who tries, you're someone who does. That's how momentum grows, through the repetition of meaningful actions anchored in purpose. The reason most people never sustain momentum is because they confuse intensity with consistency. They sprint for a week and burn out by the second. They chase massive change instead of small progress. But momentum doesn't need grand gestures. It needs stability. It needs rhythm. A small step taken every day builds more momentum than a giant leap taken once, because momentum loves consistency more than enthusiasm. Enthusiasm fades, consistency compounds. Think of a flywheel. Heavy, hard to move at first. You push and it barely turns. You push again and it moves a little more. It takes time, patience, effort. But eventually it starts spinning faster and faster, until one day it doesn't need your full strength. It moves on its own. That's how momentum works. The hardest part is the beginning, but once you've built it, momentum works for you, not against you. There's something else about momentum. It doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care whether it's working for you or against you. If you've built positive habits, it accelerates your growth. If you've built negative ones, it accelerates your downfall. If you're disciplined, it multiplies your success. If you're careless, it multiplies your mistakes. Momentum amplifies whatever direction you're already heading in. So if you want to change your life, you don't start by fighting momentum. You change its direction. You redirect your energy one small action at a time. Momentum requires faith, because in the beginning, progress is invisible. You'll show up for days, weeks, sometimes months, and see little result. That's where most people quit. They mistake slow for stagnant, but growth is never linear. It's like pushing that flywheel. It feels useless until one day it doesn't. The work compounds silently before it reveals itself publicly. The ones who keep going during the invisible phase are the ones who experience the unstoppable phase. The greatest danger to momentum isn't failure, it's comfort. Failure pushes you to learn. Comfort lulls you into complacency. When things start going well, we tend to ease off, to relax our standards, to let small disciplines slide. But that's how momentum dies, quietly, gradually, through neglect. Sustaining momentum requires humility. It requires remembering that what got you here won't keep you here. You have to keep feeding it, nurturing it, protecting it. Momentum is like a living thing. It thrives on attention and dies on neglect. Momentum also thrives on clarity. When your goals are vague, your energy scatters. When your vision is sharp, your energy focuses. Focused energy accelerates movement. It's the reason a laser cuts steel while sunlight just warms it. The more clearly you know where you're going, the more momentum works in your favor. Unclear direction kills momentum because it divides your attention, and divided attention is wasted effort. But momentum isn't only about movement forward, it's about emotional alignment too. It's hard to maintain momentum if your heart isn't in it. Purpose fuels momentum. When you're connected to something meaningful, effort feels lighter. You're not forcing yourself, you're flowing. You're pulled by vision instead of pushed by pressure. That's why the most resilient people aren't the ones with the most energy, they're the ones with the most purpose. Momentum also thrives on accountability. You can't build it in isolation. You need people who keep you aligned, who challenge you, who remind you of your why when you start to drift. Accountability adds friction in the right direction. It prevents you from veering off track. And when you share your progress, your wins, your struggles, it amplifies momentum. Because momentum shared becomes momentum multiplied. There's something beautiful about how momentum changes your relationship with time. At first, time feels like your enemy. There's never enough of it. But once momentum builds, time becomes your ally. You start doing more in less time, not because you're rushing, but because you've found your rhythm. Every effort reinforces the next. Every win fuels the next. You become efficient not through shortcuts, but through flow. But the most underestimated part of momentum is recovery. You can't move forward forever without pause. Even rivers need bends to stay alive. Momentum doesn't mean never stopping. It means knowing how to stop. Rest isn't the enemy of momentum. It's the fuel. It prevents burnout, restores clarity, and allows you to come back stronger. The key is to rest with intention, not escape with distraction. When you rest intentionally, you recharge. When you escape mindlessly, you reset to zero. Momentum also changes your mindset. Once you've built it, your fear of failure starts to fade. You realize that you can recover from setbacks faster. You've proven to yourself that progress is possible. Every time you overcome a small resistance, you strengthen your self-belief. That belief becomes the engine of unstoppable progress. It's not arrogance, it's confidence built on evidence. You know you can do it because you've done it before. Momentum is also contagious. When people see someone moving with purpose, they feel it, it inspires action. It sparks energy in others. That's why great leaders don't just talk about vision, they embody movement. Their momentum pulls others into motion. They create a culture where progress feels inevitable. Because when people are part of something that's moving forward, they start to believe they can move forward too. But momentum doesn't forgive ego. The moment you start thinking you're invincible, you lose awareness. Momentum requires humility because it's built on learning. The faster you move, the more you must pay attention. Small mistakes can compound just as quickly as small wins. The difference is awareness. The more conscious you are of your direction, the longer your momentum lasts. Momentum doesn't just change what you do, it changes who you are. It reshapes your identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who follows through, someone who grows, someone who moves forward no matter what. That identity becomes your internal engine. You stop waiting for motivation, for validation, for conditions. You just move. Because movement itself becomes part of who you are. Every breakthrough you've ever admired was built on momentum. No one wakes up great. They start small, they build habits, they stay consistent, they trust the process. And then one day, everything clicks. What once required effort now feels natural. That's not luck. That's the invisible accumulation of momentum. And once you have it, you guard it, because losing momentum means losing your rhythm, your confidence, your flow. It's far easier to maintain it than to rebuild it. Momentum doesn't require perfection, it requires persistence. It doesn't demand that you never fall, it asks that you never stop standing back up. Because every time you restart, the friction is heavier. But every time you keep moving, the resistance fades. The key is to avoid the trap of starting over. Keep the wheel turning, even slowly. A slow wheel still spins. Stopped one rusts, so when you feel stuck, when progress feels distant, when the mountain looks too steep, don't look for a giant leap. Look for your next small push. Because that small push is how momentum is built. One step at a time, one promise kept, one habit repeated, one day of effort followed by another, until one day you look up and realize you're not pushing anymore. You're being pulled. Pulled by purpose, pulled by progress, pulled by momentum. And that's the beauty of it. Momentum doesn't just make you move. It makes you believe. It reminds you that movement creates meaning. That effort compounds. That growth is not an explosion, it's an accumulation. Momentum teaches you that what you do today matters, not because of what it achieves, but because of what it sets in motion. So keep moving. Keep pushing that wheel, even when it feels heavy, even when no one notices. Because the effort that feels invisible today will become unstoppable tomorrow. That's how lives change. That's how legacies are built. Through momentum, steady, disciplined, purposeful movement that turns potential into power. And when you finally find yourself in that flow where effort meets ease and purpose meets progress, remember this: you didn't get there by accident. You built it. You earned it. And that's what makes it yours.